The Dolly Sods Wilderness originally simply Dolly Sods is a U.S. wilderness area in the Allegheny Mountains of eastern West Virginia, USA, and is part of the Monongahela National Forest of the U.S. Forest Service. Dolly Sods is a rocky, high-altitude plateau with sweeping vistas and lifeforms normally found much farther north in Canada. To the north, the distinctive landscape of the sods is characterized by stunted trees, wind-carved boulders, Heath Barrens, grassy meadows created in the last century by logging and fires, and sphagnum bogs that are much older. To the south, a dense cove forest occupies the branched canyon excavated by the North Fork of Red Creek. The name derives from an 18th-century German homesteading family the Dahls and a local term for an open mountain-top meadow a sods. Geography Topography Dolly Sods is the highest plateau of its type east of the Mississippi River with altitude ranging from around 2,700 feet at the outlet of Red Creek to about 4,000 feet at the top of a mountain ridge on the Allegheny front. Prominent summits within the wilderness are Coal Knob, Breathed Mountain, and Blackbird Knob. The highest point in the immediate area is Mount Porty Crane. Drainage Dolly Sods is on a ridge crest that forms part of the Eastern Continental Divide. Most of its area is drained by the North Fork of Red Creek, which is a tributary of the Dry Fork River. Via the Dry Fork, Black Fork, Cheat, Monongahela and Ohio rivers, it is part of the Mississippi River watershed. South of Forest Service Route 19 is the adjoining Red Creek Roaring Plains area, which is drained by the South Fork of Red Creek. Drainage on the east side of the ridge crest flows into the headwaters of the South Branch of the Potomac River, which is part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Boundaries The original Dolly Sods was a mountain-top meadow of about 650 acres at the southern end of Rochbore Plains, near the present Dolly Sods picnic area. The present-day Dolly Sods Wilderness encompasses some 17,371 acres of U.S. Forest Service land and is itself only part of a larger 32,000-acre area now known as Dolly Sods. The DSW is bordered by Forest Service Route 75 and 19 on the east and south sides, respectively. To the northeast, DSW is bordered by the Bear Rocks Nature Preserve, owned by the Nature Conservancy. The surrounding area was recently added to the wilderness and is known as Dolly Sods North. North of Dolly Sods North is an area known as Dobbin's Slashings a subarctic bog forming the headwaters of Red Creek on Cabin Mountain. Dobbin's Slashings has also been proposed for wilderness preservation. In the Cannon Valley to the west, the wilderness is adjoined by the 16,000-acre Cannon Valley National Wildlife Refuge. Almost all of DSW is in the southeast corner of Tucker County with only very small sections extending into Randolph and Grant counties. Trails There are some 47 miles of hiking trails within the DSW, many situated along the courses of abandoned railroad grades and old logging roads. The premier viewpoint within the wilderness, affording a vista of the entire Red Creek drainage, is at a set of rocky crags known as Lana unregistered trademark S-Head Rock. It is reached by an almost 3-mile climb from the nearest road. The last quarter mile is an 8-foot wide bench in the side of an otherwise steep slope. Like the cliffs constituting the eastern edge of the sods at Rochbore Plains, Lion's Head Rock consists of a mixture of sandstone and conglomerate. The Northland Loop Trail is a 0.3-mile interpretive trail just south of Red Creek Campground on FSRT 75 which accesses Alder Run Bog a typical, and much studied, northern bow or southern muskeg. History Pre-logging The Dolly Sods area was first encountered by whites when Peter Jefferson, Thomas Lewis and others surveyed in 1746 to find the limits of Thomas Fairfax, 6th Lord Fairfax of Cameron unregistered trademark S land grant from the British Crown. The famous Fairfax Line grazes the northern margin of the wilderness near Bear Rocks. This area was generally avoided as too impenetrable to easily traverse until the late 19th century. David Hunter Strother wrote an early and somewhat breathless travelogue of the area, published in Harper's Monthly magazine in 1852, in Randolph County, Virginia, is a tract of country containing from 7 to 900 square miles, entirely uninhabited, and so savage and inaccessible that it has rarely been penetrated even by the most adventurous. The settlers on its borders speak of it with a sort of dread, and regard it as an ill-omened region, filled with bears, panthers, impassable laurel brakes, and dangerous precipices. Stories are told of hunters having ventured too far, becoming entangled, and perishing in its intricate labyrinths. The desire of daring the unknown dangers of this mysterious region, stimulated a party of gentlemen to undertake it in June, 1851. They did actually penetrate the country as far as the falls of the Blackwater, and returned with marvelous accounts of his savage grandeur, and the quantities of game and fish to be found there. The extensive high areas in Dolly Sods and flat-rock roaring plains were once mostly covered by dense, ancient red spruce and eastern hemlock forest. The trees were 60 to 90 feet tall and some measured at least 12 feet in diameter. The greatest stand of red spruce in the world, in terms of size and quality, could be found along the upper Red Creek. The largest recorded tree ever cut in West Virginia was a white oak, harvested in this region. Nearly as large as a giant sequoia, it was probably well over 1,000 years old and measured 13 feet in diameter at a height of 16 feet, and 10 feet in diameter 31 feet above the base. We will probably never know how large the biggest trees in West Virginia were because most cuttings were not documented. Centuries of accumulated needles from these trees created a blanket of humus 7 to 9 feet deep. The name Dolly Sods derives from the family name of Johann Dale, a German immigrant who settled nearby. Such early settlers utilized the natural open fields on mountainsides known as sods. Logged out and burned over areas produced additional good grass cover for grazing sheep and cattle. Locals changed the spelling of Dale to Dolly, and thus one such area became known as Dolly Sods. The Dale family eventually moved on, leaving behind only the Americanized version of their name. Local historian Hugh Maxwell described the Dolly Sods area in the Wheeling Intelligencer in 1886. The top of the mountain is flat, except here and there rugged ridges and huge promontories of rocks rising above the level of the plains, and giving the scene an appearance of distance and mystery that must be witnessed before it can be understood. The logging era the area surrounding Dolly Sods was formerly described as the best spruce hemlock black cherry forest in the world, with some enormous trees up to 12 feet in diameter. The huge spruce and hemlock became accessible in 1884 when the West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh Railroad, a predecessor of the Western Maryland Railway, first arrived at nearby Davis, from a junction with the B&O Railroad at Piedmont. In 1899, the Parsons Pulp and Lumber Company established a sawmill at Dobbin on the North Branch Potomac River in Grant County. In 1902, the PPLC installed a new band sawmill on the main stem of Red Creek. The lumber boom town of Lanaville soon sprang up around it with a population that peaked at over 300 people. Shale locomotives climbed the temporary railroads into the mountains and backcountry logging camps sprang up throughout the sods, clearing away the virgin forest to feed the hungry mills. Teams of draft horses dragged all the commercial timber to the nearest tracks. When the timber was exhausted in the sector around one camp, the rails were taken up and reused elsewhere. It was into the mill at Lanaville that most of the timber of the southern two-thirds of the sods disappeared. Unfortunately, however, the humus covering the ground dried up when the protective tree cover was removed. Sparks from the locomotives, sawmills and loggers' warming fires easily ignited this humus layer and the extensive wood too small to be marketable, such as branches and tree crowns left behind by loggers. Fires repeatedly ravaged the area in the 1910s, scorching everything right down to the underlying rocks. All insects, worms, salamanders, mice and other burrowing forms of life perished and the area became a desert. The destruction was extraordinary. The complete clackhead of this ecologically fragile area, followed by extensive wildfires and overgrazing, exacerbated by the ecological stresses of the elevation, have prevented quick regeneration of the forest which has taken decades to recover. The Monongahela National Forest was created in 1915, largely motivated by a desire to mitigate the sort of wholesale destruction that had swept over the sods. In 1916 most of Dolly Sods was purchased by the federal government for the MNF from the Bridges estate. Mineral rights remained in private ownership. The Lana mill closed in 1920 after almost all the timber had been cut and the local population dwindled. The last timber was felled in the Dolly Sods area in 1924. A particularly ferocious fire raged in late July 1930 in the northernmost Red Creek and southernmost Stony River watersheds. This conflagration known as the Dobbin Slashings Fire consumed 24,800 acres and killed many trees left alone as non-commercial by the loggers. An eerie landscape persisted here for years, with the stumps of these trees perched high upon jumbles of boulders. In the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps made some modest attempts to remediate the damage to Dolly Sods by replanting stands of red spruce there. Neglect, threat, and recovery equals. In 1943 and 44, as part of the West Virginia Maneuver Area, the U.S. Army used the area as a practice artillery and mortar range and maneuver area before troops were sent to Europe to fight in World War II. Cabin Mountain and Blackbird Knob served as designated targets. Some of the artillery and mortar shells shot into the area still exist there. Dolly Sods became popular with recreationalists and conservationists in the mid-1960s, at which time political agitation began to set it aside as a preserve. Local farmers also ceased to allow their livestock to graze here at this time. Nevertheless, the area was threatened by at least 4 potential developments: subdivisions for summer homes on Cabin Mountain, as a route for a proposed federal expressway linking Washington, D.C. with the Highlands, strip mining of as many as 6 coal seams, which was already occurring within 3.5 miles of the Sods in the north, and flooding by a huge reservoir as part of the proposed Davis Power Project just to the west. An ad hoc committee of stakeholders was convened by the MNF in spring 1969. It advised that a scenic or botanical area should be set aside in the North Fork Red Creek area. In October 1970, the forest superintendent announced the creation of a 10,200-acre Dolly Sods scenic area. The Nature Conservancy played a major role in preserving the area. By 1972, it had purchased the coal rights under the future federal wilderness for $15 million. Dolly Sods finally became a federally designated wilderness area in 1975, which resulted in greatly increased numbers of visitors. The area had only an estimated 500 visitors in 1965. By 1997 there were 7,499 registered users annually. In the 1970s and 80s, it was not possible to propose Dolly Sods north for wilderness classification, as it was all privately owned by the Western Maryland Railway Company and the Virginia Electric and Power Company and was largely outside of the proclamation boundary of the MNF. Public acquisition could not go forward as the companies long refused to consider selling. In 1993, however, the Nature Conservancy paid another $6 million to acquire 6,168 acres in Dolly Sods north from the then owner, the Texas-based Quintana Corporation. This land was then donated to the Forest Service. Most recently, the Omnibus Public Lands Management Act of 2009 added 7,156 acres of Dolly Sods north to the original 10,215 acres of the wilderness to make the present total of 17,371 acres. Climate and weather: Dolly Sods is well known for its often extreme and mercurial climate. Sun, rain, snow, and fog are all possible within an hour. Cool, wet weather prevails throughout the year. Although summer temperatures can reach the 80s or higher, frost is possible at any time of the year in higher elevations, and winter temperatures can dip below zero. Yearly precipitation is more than 55 inches. Precipitation is heavy because rising air masses cool as they hit the higher mountains and deposit moisture. Snowfall is impressive and may reach 150 inches in a year. This heavy snow breaks down trees and shrubs. Heavy glazes of ice and deposits of rime frost also break down trees and shrubs, giving them their characteristic forms and gnarled appearance. Prevailing winds are from the west and blow almost constantly. The effect of these winds can be seen in the flag-form red spruce trees. Their branches grow on one side, away from the wind. Frost and snow effects also contribute to the flag-form shape of the trees. Because of the drying influence of the wind, no branches are produced on the west side of the tree above the protective shrub layer. Stunted branches on the east side give the trees a twisted appearance. Where spruce are protected by a shrub layer, luxuriant webs of branches extend for a radius of a dozen feet, giving a mat-like look to vegetation. The explosive collision of air masses attendant upon the Allegheny front dumps many tons of snow on Dolly Sods each winter. During the winter of 2003, 290 inches of snow fell in the area. Humid and warmer air from the Potomac River Valley to the east and south meets colder Canadian air blowing off the Great Lakes. This churns and produces the locally severe weather that can sometimes rival that of Mount Washington in New Hampshire. This section of the Allegheny front is one of the windiest spots east of the Mississippi, a fact responsible for the wind farming that is now so highly visible just north of Bear Rocks. Wind recorders in the wilderness have been known to blow away in the gusts that can exceed 100 miles per hour. Just to the west in Cannon Valley, temperatures of 40°F below zero have been recorded. Ecology =flora =. Dolly Sods is well known for its open expanses of sphagnum bog, heath shrubs and scattered and stunted red spruce all creating impressions of areas much farther north. Many plant communities are indeed similar to those of sea-level eastern Canada. But the ecosystems within the sods are remarkably varied. In recent decades, the many stages of ecologic succession throughout the sods have made the region one of enduring interest to botanists. Sods. The local term sods is a traditional name referring to several high-elevation meadows in the high Alleghenies. The term is virtually synonymous with the grass bald of the southern Appalachians. These grassy areas on mountain slopes or summits apparently existed by the scores in the mid-Appalachian region when whites first intruded there. According to botanist L. L. Core, the silvery sheen of the grass, against the dark green background of the spruce, attracted the attention of the early settlers. The dominant grass is Allegheny flyback, a grass so light in weight that it would fly back against the scythe of the mower. The origin of these grassy tracts has been the subject of wide-ranging speculation. Core favored a multifactorial explanation involving a bald susceptible zone present at mountain summits where various causes initially wiped out trees followed by succession by grasses that was so competitive with the new tree seedlings that the cleared areas persist for a much longer period than at lower elevations. Heath Barrens, the extensive views across the tundra-like wind-swept open meadows in the northern section of Dolly Sods are reminiscent of Alaskan landscapes. Heath Barrens is a botanical term, but the traditional local name for these unusual expanses was Huckleberry Plains. These upper reaches have been extensively colonized by various ericaceae, blueberry and cranberry, huckleberry, rose azalea and rosebay rhododendron, mountain laurel, teaberry, and Allegheny menziesea. Members of Rosaceae also abound, chokeberry, mountain ash, serviceberry, and pin cherry. Boulder fields left by the denuding topsoil fires of 80 years ago are extensive here. Sphagnum Glades. These spruce-edged sphagnum bogs are found in the upper sections of Red Creek and its tributaries, often in association with thickets of speckled alder. There are similar areas throughout the high Alleghenies, most famously the Cranberry Glades. The largest one at Dolly Sods is about a mile long and half a mile wide. The thick carpet of sphagnum moss and the polytrichum moss hummocks also sustain cotton grass, round leaf sundew and the lichen known as reindeer moss. In addition to the spruce, the bog margins are frequented by ferns, sedges and the occasional balsam fir. The three-toothed cinquefoil is often abundant and orchids for example the pink lady's slipper are sometimes seen. Hardwood forests. The more southerly section of the Dolly Sods wilderness includes maturing spruce copses, rhododendron thickets, northern hardwoods on the ridges and cove hardwoods in the deep tributaries of Red Creek. All of the original old-growth forest was removed a century ago, followed by fires that burned, then smoldered, for months. Much of the deep topsoil was lost forever. Today, there are patches of recovering native red spruce forest plus twisted yellow birch, sugar and red maple, eastern hemlock, and black cherry. American beech, Pine and hickory can also be found. The wild onion known as the ramp is also present in the deeper forests. Fauna the larger megafauna which once inhabited the high Alleghenies elk, bison, mountain lion were all exterminated during the 19th century. They survived longer in this area, however, than in other parts of the eastern United States. Because of the high altitude the climate is cool and some animals are more similar to ones found about 1,600 miles farther north in Canada. Many species found here are near their southernmost range. For example, the snowshoe hare found in Dolly Sods is usually found in Canada and Alaska and is adapted to snow conditions, with its large, hairy feet which allow it to run on the snow surface. Beaver which were restored to the state after a period of extirpation continually create and refurbish their beaver ponds in these high-elevation watersheds. Other animals that may be encountered include red and gray foxes, bobcats, black bears, groundhog, timber rattlers, wild turkey, and grouse. White-tailed deer, also once eliminated from the region, were reintroduced in the 1930s and are now abundant. Currently, the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources is considering an elk restoration program in Dolly Sods and other areas. The Cheat Mountain salamander, listed since 1989 by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as threatened, is also present. Recreation. Camping is allowed in Dolly Sods, but visitors are cautioned to leave no trace. All off-road motorized vehicles and any cutting of live vegetation or camping near roads are forbidden. Hunting and fishing within state law are permitted. Dolly Sods is particularly popular during midsummer with people who go there to pick blueberries and huckleberries. From May through late June, extensive and spectacular displays of mountain laurel in flower may be viewed. Due to severe winter weather, FSRT 75, flanking the eastern side of Dolly Sods, is typically closed to vehicles from January 1 to April 15. There is an extensive network of hiking trails in the wilderness totaling 47 miles. Some follow old logging railroad grades, and occasionally you see some remnants of railroad ties and metal equipment. Because USGS and USFS maps of the trails have been inaccurate, a 2004 mapping site provides good maps based on GPS data. Trails include the Spruce Knob Seneca Rocks National Recreation Area is adjacent to Dolly Sods Flatrock Roaring Plains on the east and the south. See also, List of U.S. Wilderness Areas, Wilderness Act. References. Citations Other sources Brooks, Morris, Remarkable Dolly Sods, Outdoor West Virginia, title changed to Wonderful West Virginia, 1970. November 1969, pages 10:13. January 1970, pages 10:13. February 1970, pages 10:13. Hall, George A., The Birds of the Dolly Sods Area Sortie, 1984, The Red Start, Wheeling, West Virginia, October issue. Hutton, Eugene E., Paraglacial Features of Dolly Sods, The Red Start, Wheeling, West Virginia, July issue. Hutton, Eugene E., Plant Description of Dolly Sods, The Red Start, Wheeling, West Virginia, October issue. Keating, Steve, A Dolly Sods North, Blackwater Companion, A Guide to Hiking Through the History, Geology and Ecology of the Region. Parsons, West Virginia, McLean Printing, Unile, L. Pete, Wonder in the Tundra WVA's Dolly Sods is a Wilderness Worth a Look, The Washington Post, September 16, pd 9. Pyle, Ann H., Ferns and Fern Allies at Dolly Sods, The Red Start, Wheeling, West Virginia, October issue. Venable, Norma Jean, Dolly Sods, West Virginia Renewable Resources Unique Areas Series 813, West Virginia University Extension Service, Morgantown, West Virginia. U.S. Forest Service, Dolly Sods Wilderness and Surrounding Area, pamphlet. External links, Dolly Sods Wilderness at the U.S. Forest Service, Dolly Sods at American Byways, Dolly Sods Forest Walk at Forests of the Central Appalachian Project, Dolly Sods at Wilderness, Webcam of Dolly Sods Wilderness.